Hey everyone, this is an update to the video from 2 weeks ago. I said in the previous video that I hope next time I will come with some better news. And while it was looking very bad, thankfully there has now been a positive development. Firstly, however, in terms of what was discussed last time, there have been no changes. I spoke about how I reached out to the government and how they were supposed to be contacting me within 10 days. However, I have not heard a single thing from them since filling in the online form. Yet, I did this at the start of the month. I did say how I was very dubious about them actually helping me, but for them to not even get back to me is something completely different and something I would have never imagined. As for my mother, she still hasn't even read my messages. I also sent her another message on Sunday morning asking her to provide me phone numbers for any other family members, but that didn't cause her to read my messages either. But the reason why I initially didn't ask this is because I am not estranged due to me not making effort, but instead due to a complete lack of caring and interest on their part, and thus I knew this attempt would not result in anything regardless. I've also not heard anything else from the chain of hotels where my account has been used for over £1,000 of fraudulent transactions. Furthermore, as I couldn't afford to pay this bill, they have now closed down my account. However, this is something I will be continuing to try and get sorted, and I was actually told if we don't hear back from the hotels where the card was used fraudulently, then the hotel chain will attempt to get in touch with them again. But I've not heard a single thing from anyone since the last video, and as I showed last time, the two that did get in touch have currently not provided that many details either. I also noticed that some people were confused about why I didn't seem to view going to the police as an immediate priority. Now, I would like to have done this sooner, but with the way policing goes in this country, it would take a long time, and I have had many more pressing matters to sort out. As it caused so much overall damage to things, I had no choice to find somewhere even cheaper than where I was. So even if it was to be sorted a bit quicker, I would no longer be able to stay there in the first place. Plus, for the time being, I'm now currently on the other side of the country. One consequence of having to go to the cheapest hotel I can find, even if this means being on the other side of the country, has been that this hotel has been really bad in all sorts of ways. Last night, for instance, I was awoken at around 2 AM, but I didn't realize what had caused it until a little later, when I went to the building's entrance. At the time, I thought it was just the usual sort of trouble with inconsiderate drunk people and such. But while it was caused by drunk people, what happened is there was a huge fight between a number of guests involving glass bottles. And this happened in the corridors upstairs and downstairs, and there was blood and damage all over the place. I didn't decide to try to record some of the aftermath with a camera until later on, and by this point most of it had been cleaned up. But the police were called and some of them had to be taken away and so forth, but the other people seemed to be allowed to stay here. They've broken one of the doors and got blood literally everywhere, and despite it happening inside, there was even blood all over someone's car parked outside. But again, most of it had been cleaned up. But due to how much of it there was, there have been bits missed, such as the fact that the main entrance door has somehow got the keyhole stained in blood. And so this happened last night, and it should give you a bit of an idea about what it's been like here. Also, I mentioned how at the last place there were a lot of rats, but here there's been an even greater rat infestation, and I haven't gone a day without seeing them. Following posting the last video, I did make another attempt to find a cheap apartment to rent, as that would work out much cheaper than a hotel. And I sent dozens of messages to different types of places, including people looking for roommates. But as I discussed last time, I got nowhere with this. And furthermore, PayPal Pay in Free has still randomly been unavailable for my account. I thought that perhaps if it was given some time and things, it may appear again, but that hasn't been the case. And so I'm thinking that it's going to now stay unavailable for at least quite a while. But I did say there's been a positive development, and that is that I suddenly had an idea to check Airbnb. I've not had this suggested to me, and my early experience with checking it has been for in London, which is very expensive. But I had a look at places around the area I'm currently located, which is very far away, and I managed to find a few places that offer longer term stays and at a fraction of the cost of even a cheap hotel. And I have found a nice lady who is offering me a room in her property, and she is saying I can stay with her for as long as I need to get back on my feet. And she is also going to give me a discount due to it being a longer term stay, meaning it will be £500 a month, which is much much cheaper than £50 a day for a hotel. Unfortunately, I had thought I ran out of options and I had already booked this hotel until the weekend, and so that's been a big waste of money and has meant I've had to stay here. But I will now be checking into the Airbnb, and it seems exactly the sort of thing that I have needed this whole time. And now I believe everything will start to turn around again for myself and for the channel. I also said in the last video that I would show receipts for this hotel, which I've had help paying for due to some generous viewer donations. I dread to think what would have been without your help, so once again a huge thank you for your support. Unfortunately, I only recently worked out that the prices can differ greatly depending on not only when you book, but also possibly depending on how many days in a row you book. They seem to be cheaper the more in advance you book, but sometimes it can be even cheaper if you book last minute. However, sometimes last minute bookings can instead be more expensive, and you can also run the risk of the place being fully booked. Also, for some reason, if you book multiple days in a row, it seems they often charge you more than if you were to book a day at a time. As for what's next, I'll be checking into the Airbnb, and I've been told I'll be able to stay for as long as it takes to get back on my feet. However, I am unfortunately now completely penniless again, and I could again really do with some help to cover the cost of the Airbnb and to make sure this next period goes smoothly. There'll be a link to my PayPal in the description if anyone is able to help, and once again, anyone who has helped me through this extremely difficult period will forever have my gratitude. As for the channel, I'll be jumping straight back in everything before the end of the week, and I'm aiming to be running everything full time again, which due to the circumstances is something I've not been able to do so far this year. And so I'll be aiming for many more videos each week than you've seen so far, but also not just quantity, but also more of the longer in-depth content. Thus, the plan is to try and get through the rest of this difficult period, and then due to payments being delayed, I should pretty much be back on my feet in around 2 months. But in terms of the channel's activity, that should be back to normal once I check into the Airbnb. And so once again, if you can help me with a donation, it would be forever appreciated. And I will show receipts again either on Twitter, YouTube, or both. And thank you so much for being so patient with me and for your understanding during this extremely difficult period I've had.